We are now 290 days away from the midterms, and right now, the city of Minneapolis remains very much on edge after days and days of unrest. The city is expecting protests and marches tomorrow, both from groups that have been pushing back against the presence of ICE, as well as some right-wing organizations. The state's National Guard has already been mobilized, and tonight, a federal judge imposed restrictions on ICE and DHS agents, ordering them not to interfere with or arrest peaceful protesters. Also tonight, MS Now has confirmed the Department of Justice has launched a criminal investigation of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey for allegedly obstructing federal immigration enforcement. That's according to two people familiar. Meanwhile, we're learning more about Renee Good and the moments after she was shot and killed. Transcripts of 911 calls show the shock and fury that erupted in that moment as dispatchers were flooded with calls. MS Now obtained the call logs, which were first reported by the New York Times. The records show paramedics arrived 4 minutes after the first 911 call. When they found Good, she wasn't breathing and had an irregular pulse. Good had 2 apparent gunshot wounds to her chest, another on her left arm, and a possible 4th to her head. In an interview with The Times, a lawyer for Renee Good's family said she was concerned about the actions of immigration agents in the city, but wasn't following anyone around that morning. According to the lawyer, Good and her partner had just dropped their son off at school, then stopped when they saw federal agents on their drive home. Speaking of the son's school, it's had to switch to online learning because of threats. Minnesota Public Radio reports the charter school, which focuses on social justice, has become a regular target of the right wing online since the shooting. Because of that, the small school has shut down almost all of its online presence. Today, President Donald Trump again railed against Minnesota on social media, calling the protesters troublemakers, agitators, and insurrectionists, who are in many cases highly paid professionals. Trump wrote if he is forced to act, the situation will be solved quickly and effectively. But when he was asked later about what it would take to send in troops by way of the Insurrection Act, Trump seemed to kind of back down. Watch.
If I needed it, I'd use it. I don't think there's any reason right now to use it. But if I needed it, I'd use it. It's very powerful.
And with that, we're going to bring in our nightcap, Ron Insana, veteran financial journalist and the publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack, Philip Bump, MS Now columnist and contributor, Molly Jong-Fast, MS Now political analyst, host of Fast Politics, the podcast, and contributing writer for New York Times Opinion, and Hayes Brown, writer and editor for MS Now Daily. Also with us, MS Now legal analyst Christy Greenberg. She's a former federal prosecutor and host of the YouTube show Courtside with Christy Greenberg. Christy, I'm going to start with you and this news that the DOJ is investigating Governor Walz and Mayor Frey for allegedly obstructing law enforcement. My understanding is the statute that would apply here would have required there to be evidence of some kind of physical move to block law enforcement from executing their work on the ground there. From my understanding of the situation, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And in fact, every statement I've seen from these two politicians has been urging people to be peaceful, to be careful on the streets of Minneapolis. But what's your understanding of this case and if the DOJ really has anything here?
Well, it looks like they're looking at a statute that is rarely used, where it really criminalizes conspiracies to prevent federal law enforcement from performing their duties through force, intimidation, or threats. Right? They're advancing this theory that essentially this is not political speech anymore. They are using force threats to essentially criminally obstruct what the federal agents are doing. And Todd Blanche made a statement in particular where he said that he's focused on stopping them from terrorism. I believe focused on stopping you from your terrorism by whatever means necessary. Again, we're talking about everything that we have heard. I agree with you. I haven't heard anything from the governor or the mayor where they have been trying to incite violence, encourage violence whatsoever. So to call this terrorism, to call this criminal obstruction, again, I don't know what facts they are looking at, what evidence they are looking at to make those kinds of accusations. But clearly, they're very serious accusations. We'll see if they can back them up.
They're serious accusations, but at the same time, this sort of seems unserious. For anyone who's been watching all this unfold, the word terrorism simply does not apply to what we have heard from the governor and mayor in that state. Do you think there are really teeth here, or is this really just a way to send a signal of we're watching you, we're coming after you? This is part of the broader retribution campaign to send a message?
I mean, that may well be, but at some point, I mean, the Department of Justice, if you're going to continue to kind of threaten these criminal investigations and it's just words and they don't back them up with any actions, at some point it becomes the boy who cried wolf. So I'm not sure what the objective is other than to play politics. And what it does, unfortunately, is if there is really no evidence, which again, we at least I haven't seen any of them actually trying to incite anybody to act violently, then when there is some kind of activity that crosses the line, it really kind of undermines those kinds of activities that law enforcement should be policing, where there are law enforcement officers in danger. So it's not an accusation to make lightly if you don't have any evidence of it. So on the one hand, I hope they don't have evidence because I hope it's not happening. On the other hand, it would be very troubling to just make these accusations with no support whatsoever and play politics in this way. So either way, it's certainly troubling what the developments are in Minnesota.
Troubling may be an understatement to describe the events in Minnesota. Philip, is there any modern precedent for what we're seeing unfold there?
Well, I mean, there's an imperfect precedent, which is what happened in 2020, which I think is very instructive and I think probably under-recognized. In 2020, we had George Floyd killed by law enforcement in the city of Minneapolis. We saw protests emerge there and elsewhere. And what we also saw was we saw Donald Trump step up and for really the first time as president, try and enforce his will, try and be the iron fist that he's always wanted to be in that city, in particular and then elsewhere. He eventually went on and said that Tim Walz did a good job in 2020, which people I think may forget, and it's important to remember. But yeah, I mean, what we're seeing here really can be distilled to 4 words, which is how dare you object? All of this is downstream from Donald Trump and his cronies and his allies feeling as though it is improper for anyone to say you shouldn't do these things. ICE sweeping into Minneapolis, if you are protesting them, how dare you do that? If you are saying, Donald Trump, you can't invoke the Insurrection Act, how dare you? I get to do what I want as president. All of that, I think, has its birth in 2020, probably before that in his presidency, but really we're seeing resonate now.
So there's an element of I'm coming back here to finish the job.
100%. I mean, we heard all these reports in 2020 how he wanted to have the protesters be confronted by soldiers, how he got rid of Mark Esper because Mark Esper wouldn't invoke the Insurrection Act. All of that is leading to this moment where he's very eager to move forward.
Molly, as you see all of this, on the one hand, I think initially as this all got started, people saw it as this very frightening show of force from the Trump administration. Of course, it is still for the people living there, of course, on a day-to-day basis, very frightening. But do you see it as proof of Trump's strength or actually really a tell of weakness?
So, when this all started, I have talked to Governor Walz a bunch. So I reached out to him immediately and I said, what is going on over there? And what I think is important to realize about why Donald Trump went into Minneapolis and Minnesota more in the first place was because of this YouTube video from Nick Shirley about a fraud that happened in 2022.
A right-wing YouTuber.
Right. In 2022, a fraud that was reported on where people were prosecuted, where they were sent to jail, where they were fined. So that is why ICE is in Minnesota right now, which is on the face of it, insane, right? They are targeting Somali refugees because of a YouTube video that was about something that happened many years ago, but that these people hadn't ever read reporting on for whatever
reason. And the strange
reason.
thing about it is actually the vast majority of the Somali American community there, they're citizens. They're here legally, in fact.
Right, or they have refugee status.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole thing is cooked up in the craziest way. And, even tonight when we saw this news, I texted Governor Walz and I said, what is happening? And he said, he has a statement, but the first part of the statement, which I think is really the most important, our office has not received any notice.